Guys, it's your boy Joe Zapata here, and we got a great guest coming on. He is the son of Hall of Famer, the one of the greatest wrestlers too of all time, is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and he's going to answer some of your fan questions that you have. So let me bring him on right now. I think he's coming on. Hold on, he just logged off or something. He's on his way in. Hold on, we got a bunch of questions that came in. Give me a couple minutes. Just going to make sure he comes in. 1 second. He's coming on. And he's going to answer all your questions, all the questions that you have about his father. I mean, I did take some of them out that were not, 100% about, wrestling, more personal stuff. But here he is, Mr. Travis Orndorff. Let me see. I can't see him. There he is. Travis, what's up, my man?
Joe, my brother, it's good to be back. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, haven't seen you in a while, man. How you making out? You feeling good?
I could complain, but it wouldn't do any good, right? So, but no, I'll tell you, Joe. I think it's important as we get this started, because if you know anything about what we've done on social media to honor my father's legacy, the place I come from is a place of gratitude, and there's a statement: a foolish man does not desire understanding, only to express his opinion. And so, it's important to me as we even have these questions answered. And I'm so happy that people, even have a desire to hear those things. But,
yeah,
with all the things going on in the world, I had the blessing of a hot shower, which wasn't available 100 years ago, or even sometimes 50 years ago. I've got heat inside this house, even though I'm still wearing a hoodie. Like, man, I'm just coming from a place of gratitude, and I appreciate you doing this and allowing me the opportunity to share.
Yeah, well, everyone loves your father. I mean, the questions I got, I kind of sorted them out to the best, the ones that I think you would be able to answer, not the ones like what headlock did he put on Georgie Animal Steel in '82. I mean, we got questions that more in depth about you and him, and this segment obviously is called, Ask a Wrestler's Son, and that's what we're gonna do. We got Travis Orndorff, son of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. So I got some questions here, Travis, and ready. I'm going to put them on the screen, read them to you, and you tell me how you feel about it. Here we go. First one is Greg B, and he says, "Hey Travis, your dad was my childhood hero when wrestling was wrestling. What was your favorite activity to do at home with you when you was not on the road?"
Yeah, this is not a sexy answer at all. But what I'll two-part it. His favorite activity was the gym. Yeah. And was that was his life. It really and the second thing would be hunting. And I remember at a young age, just so you know, he was intense about everything. So going hunting was not like a fun trip. It was it was like being in commando, right? Like 4 a.m, freezing your butt off, no cover. Like, I got so cold one time I went with him, I put my feet inside of his boots and they wrapped them because my feet were so cold. And, but I was raised one more rep, right? So I pushed through, and he's like, "Yeah, you didn't break." And I'm like, "I wanted to," but you learn resilience that way. So his favorite activity was honestly like the gym and then hunting. And he called him his therapy. He really did. He's like, if I don't get that out of my system, if I don't have that moment of silence and clarity. He wasn't listening to any music. He was focused, and he worked out by himself. And so when he would come into town, considering, let's just say up until I was 10 years old, he wrestled. So prior to that, what it would look like when he would come into town, say on a Thursday, he might leave Friday or Saturday. So he would come into town. He would come get me out of my bed at, midnight while I'm sleeping, bring him in there, and I'd wake up there cuddling with him in the bed. And he'd look over at me and go, "How's school going?" And I'm like, "Good." And he's like, "Do you have any tests today?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "You want to hang out with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And we would do his routine. Like, we would get up, and there was a Gold's Gym and where I grew up in Fayetteville, and he was friends with the owner. So we would go to Gold's Gym, and he'd be working out, and I would go work out. And so I was in karate. I was athletic until, at 9 and 10 years old, I got really, really deathly ill. And but prior to that, karate, baseball, all the, soccer, track, I was doing all the sports. And one of the things that is ironic, because I'm bald, is he loved my hair, and he wouldn't let me cut it. I had the big bowl cut.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I was doing leg extensions, and this guy was working out next to me, and he came over and he's like, "Wow, that's a lot of weight." And I'm like, "Okay," and he goes up to my dad and he goes, "That's the strongest little girl I've ever seen." He how long my hair was. I was so pretty that he thought I was so. My dad never let me live that down. There was a moment they were like, "Yeah, he's the strongest little girl I've ever met." So I got ribbed about that my entire life. But it was, and I think what I would share just to kind of cap that is, often people look at my dad and say, like when I saw him wrestle, like I idolized him, I wanted his body, right? And there are men, Jay Park, I bring this story up because I think it's so endearing. Jay is in like incredible shape, right? But he idolized my dad. He's like, your dad got me in the gym, and he's jacked, right? Well, he sent me like a photo from when he was a kid. His mom let him do this. My mom would have never let me, but gave him a green marker, and he drew the lines down his arm to look like my dad's veins. And, so I get to see the little picture of this little boy, and now the product. And what I would say is when people ask me, we spend a lot of time just doing the disciplines. Dad didn't divert from his disciplines diet wise, like he was just that intense. But the goal I would tell anybody is don't fall in love with the reward. My dad was in love with the process. So he looked the way he did. It was a byproduct of loving the gym and loving his diet, right? Like he did not, that thing of like, I cannot go. That was not, he was not wired that way. It was not even an option. It would be like anything else. I wake up every morning and drink a cup of coffee, 1 cup. I have 1 cup of coffee. And if I skipped that, I would feel off. Right. And that's how he felt about the gym.
Okay. All right. Next question is actually still on to the gym topic, actually. And this one's a little bit more personal here. Jim P, Miami, Florida. He goes, your dad was jacked, one of the best bodies in wrestling ever. Did he take steroids?
Absolutely. Okay. Like I say that, and Jim, I appreciate your willingness to ask the question versus making assumptions.
Yeah.
But I would tell you, he did, and it would have been in the WWF years. During the WCW years, not so much. And at that point they had HGH, and he was prescribed that. Like I had the same endocrinologist he did. So he did use HGH, but he had he had low testosterone at a very young age for a man, which was in his 20s and 30s. He had already been tested. So what I would say is the one thing that Dad and I had when we talked about that was not, he said a couple of things. One, he said getting steroids back then was much safer than it is now. Right?
Yeah, it was legal. It was legal back then.
It was legal, and this is the 80s. So there was legal access, and there was only a couple places you got these things from. And what he told me, I thought was very unique because I said, "Hey, Dad, like because I was like 160 pounds, in early 20s, and I was getting to the gym, and I'm like, hey, man, what about like me doing a cycle?" And he's like, "Travis, it's not what it used to be." He's like, there's legal ramifications. Like back then we got them. It wasn't illegal. Nobody cared. It wasn't, and because they were cleaner, and you knew what you were getting, there wasn't as much of a risk. What he did say, the biggest mistake he saw men make in wrestling, and my father was the only thing I ever saw my father addicted to besides the gym and hunting was a dip, right? Like he was always, he dipped. There was this one, nicotine. Yep. And he always said he did it out of boredom. And I'm like, I totally get that. Right. But he never was it. If he drank, it was very little. Like we never had alcohol at the house. He might have a glass of red wine. Like it wasn't Dad killed a bottle tonight ever. And I don't remember him really drinking or even having beer at the house until he was in his mid 60s after cancer. And the doctor was like, I don't care how you get calories. And so he would drink like 3 beers. Right. But when it came to the steroids, he said, son, like, one, it was safe in comparison today, because this is now like, 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the second thing is, he said, I always cycled them. I didn't stay on them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the wrestlers and the men that often died early from a heart attack and from some of these other, the morbidity is pretty high within the wrestling community of that time. Yeah. But when they partied. So it was, there's a lot that went into like the excess. Mm-hmm. But when he and the cool thing is when he told me he cycled, I could look at pictures and go, I see it, because you are bigger here than you are here. So if it was WrestleMania, yeah, he cycled and got ready for WrestleMania. Like his body was in the best shape because of the visibility, but he wasn't on it all the time. Okay. And, he might do 2 cycles a year for 4 years. Right. Mm-hmm. But then when he retired from wrestling in 1988, no, he didn't do it for years. Right. But the thing is that people have to remember wrestling was a circus attraction. It wasn't its own entity. It was part of the circus. So there was no money in it at that point. And it's not the fans' fault that they did this, but my dad was 6 foot. In order to be able to compete with people that were 6'6", 6'8", he had to have something distinct, and his body was it. So for me, I genuinely, like, when people have this moral attitude towards it, I'm like, that was his job. He was supposed to look like that. And it was done under doctor supervision. And everybody I know, like the people that say it often, I'm like, man, I could give you steroids to the day you die and you'd never look like my dad. Because yes, he used them, but they don't work unless you do the other things. Yeah, like you have to do the diet and the gym, like, that was always his number one focus. So yes, there were times that he cycled into it, especially for big events and to look the best he could. But I would never encourage anybody to do them today. You can legally get HGH, you can legally get, testosterone. I'm 47, and because of some medical issues, like I take half a cc of testosterone every week. And it keeps my levels got into the 100s. I was like 116, 3 years ago after, medications and other things. So, but I take them with doctor's supervision. I go get my blood work done. Like I do all the things I'm supposed to do. And as you can see, they're not working like they did for my dad. Right. So it's, he absolutely did. But I would have the caveat. It's not what you think it was. It was much more controlled.
All right, here we go. Next question. Very good. Chris T from Tampa, Florida says, hi, Travis. Dad was a legit tough guy. Did he ever get physical with you?
No, not ever. I can remember I got a spanking one time from him when I was 7 years old. Okay. And I came home. I was supposed to be home at 8, and I got home at 9:30, and I got a spanking. But it wasn't physical, if that makes any sense. It was, I got a belt, and in fact, he accidentally let go of it because he was trying to do such a light touch that the buckle came and kind of scratched my butt, and that hurt worse than anything. Was the buckle caught me, but it wasn't like he was aggressive with it. Okay. And I would tell you, he was never physical with anybody. My nieces. He raised my brother's children, and he was. And all of them would tell you he was tender. He never got physical with my mom, although I know he wanted to, and ditto to that myself. But I never saw him lose his temper with children. But I did have the opportunity to see him around some of the boys, like, because I lived in the dressing room when I traveled with him, which is several times a year. And then when it was at WCW, I could be there every other week because it was in Atlanta, right? There was a level of respect they had that I didn't really recognize until I was much older. That one, he respected every guy that worked there. He didn't call them jobbers. They were professional wrestlers. He made sure they got a good match out of him. It wasn't always a squash. He wasn't stiff with him. He wasn't aggressive with him. So he was a legit tough guy. And if you crossed a line with him, the problem is he didn't know how to turn it off. Because, you know, he was like that. People are like, you know, who would win between him and Rick Rude? And I'm like, I actually believe my dad, because I don't think my dad would think about the consequences. And a lot of the tough guys would go, I don't want to go to jail. That was not in my dad. Like, that was out the window, right? So it's not that he was tougher. It's that he just didn't have an off button. He didn't have that moment in him. Because I remember after the Vader fight, right?
Yep.
And he was scared he was going to get fired. He didn't think about that till after the fact, right? Because in that moment, it was that. And so, but no, he never got physical with me. Although I did wrestle him one time for a nonprofit. Like, I ended up wrestling him, and he was grabbing my hair. Again, I had a ton of hair. I was joking the other day. I was like, maybe that's why I went bald. He was pulling it so hard. But you know, if you looked at the video, it looks like he's just dragging me all around the ring by my hair. And I'm like, that didn't even hurt, right? So even when he tossed me, he's like, about to toss you, right? And so, like, I would leap, but it really did look like it was like this aggressiveness. But he wouldn't hurt anybody. He wasn't white. And when it came to children or anybody with like a disability, like it's funny, some of the words that are canceled now, you know, but I remember one time a friend made a joke about somebody that was disabled. Like, my dad was one of the people that was involved with the Special Olympics, right? And so Make-A-Wish was a little bit different back then. It was involvement. But a friend of mine made a joke comment about somebody that was disabled. And my dad pulled that kid aside. And I assure you, 40 years later, that kid still has not made that comment ever again. Right. So he was very protective of the weak.
Yep. Okay. Very good. All right. Next one. Bert F. from New York says, honestly, Travis, when Dad died, I cried for hours. He was a pillar of strength. Did other wrestlers come to hospital to see him?
No, but you have to know it wasn't an option. I couldn't even get into the hospital to see him because it was during COVID. Okay. And so I was one of the first people that got COVID, and I got it several times. And so I had gone to our house for his birthday party. And to be transparent, I didn't have a great relationship with my mother. And so unfortunately, and I own this, my dislike for her overrode at times my love for my father. So Dad and I talked on the phone all the time, but and I actually tried to get custody of him at one point because I saw it in 2015. He got sick and went to the hospital. Now, I didn't know this but it happened during COVID. I was not listed as next of kin on the documentation. So when I would call in, they would say, you can't visit. And so I was kind of following him around a little bit, not knowing how bad it was. And then finally, when he was at Grady Memorial Hospital, I got the clean thing saying I didn't have COVID. And they had started to loosen up the restrictions. And I went to visit him, and I was the first visitor that had come because nobody could go. Well, there were people that could go that were on the list, but two of them were not. 2 of them were incarcerated, so they couldn't go. And my mom didn't go visit. So when I walked in and I saw him in the condition he was in, I lost it. I don't think I've ever acted that way in my life like I did that day. And I remember being in the shower at one point, and I've never done this since, and I had never done it before. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, and I couldn't get it out. Like, the anger just absorbed my soul. So when I went up there and took that video, it was to get custody of him because of what they said, you can't take him. You're not listed on this sheet. And I won't say what I said. I'm not proud of that either. Like, but when I saw my dad in that condition, I broke. Like, something inside me broke. The thing that kind of like I mean, I had a temper at times. I wasn't a physical person, but like that moment, I remember thinking like I would hurt these people, every last one of them, if I was at that point. So by the grace of God, and just being honest, like we broke HIPAA violations in order to, so I ended up making arrangements with a lady that was willing to take him for free. And I, that's a whole nother thing, but she got him. And then I went up there and I asked my mom to fill out the documents and put me as first on the note. And that didn't happen. And so in order to get custody of him, I went back up there 3 days later, took him to the hospital, and the social worker there released him to me, and he stayed with me until, eventually he passed. And when my dad died, by the way, I mean, from the time I found him until a year, so that was in like March, May, that whole ordeal was going down. The dates I don't remember. I cried every single day at some point. And to be honest with you, man, I had not drank in a long time. I was drinking a 6-pack of beer every day. Like I barely made it through the day. And it was a year later that I cried so hard leading up to the anniversary of his death. I couldn't work. I took a leave of absence to deal with my depression because it was so bad. And so there's a picture of me next to the headstone, and I'm kind of smiling, but I'm like, man, I was falling apart. So I went to therapy, and I was going to like group therapy, gosh, 3 days a week, and seeing so 4 days a week I was going to counseling just to deal with the depression. And so what I'll tell you is, and I'll end is, those social media pages were a promise that I made to my dad on his deathbed because he wanted me to do them before that. But if not for the fans, because I thought I was going to tell you who my dad is, but I found out who my dad is from you in many ways. Those relationships and that process of doing the social media, which here 4 years later, I never expected, right? I never thought in my mind, I thought it was going to be this like 6 months adventure of grief. And here we are, but it was fans. I mean, people that I built true relationships with that constantly checked on me and encouraged me and told me I had value outside of my father. And so the social media, those relationships I built with people saved my life. By the great, Jesus and those people, they were used as a conduit to become the man I think my father always wanted me to be.
Oh, wow. That's great. Ralph G from Brooklyn, New York says, I heard a rumor your dad was supposed to be Ivan Drago in Rocky IV.
That's true. So there was 2 parts. One of them was, he was Russian, and it was in Rambo 2. And then the other one was Rocky IV as Ivan Drago. And so Dad flew out to LA, and he met with Sylvester Stallone's wife at the time, Bridget Nielsen, I think her name was.
Yeah, Bridget Nielsen. Yeah,
the woman that was in Rocky IV.
Yeah,
and and so that was and her assistant and his assistant, all that stuff. And there was that was on the table, but it never went any further because Vince wouldn't give him the time off. And so like Jesse Ventura took that risk and went into, and did
Predator.
But he lost his job at WWF. Right. So, and I think my dad didn't have the confidence to believe he could be an actor. Right. He was a wrestler. And so this was like a side thing. He wasn't going to plan to do what we've seen Dave Bautista or John Cena do to transition. And that wasn't even a thing yet. Like Hogan hadn't done that. If you left your spot at WWF where he was making really good money, you wouldn't get it back. Why do you think they wrestled injured? Because if you said, hey, I need to take time off, you're out of the rotation. They're contracted employees. So he would have been putting his career at risk to, or honestly, he might not have. Now, as popular as those movies were, it probably would have opened other opportunities to be the henchman or the bad guy. And you know, there's a world. But when he went to that LA, he told me this. Because I was an actor when I was growing up, and there was an opportunity for me to go and take an opportunity with, do some, actually get into it in Orlando, Florida. Okay. And I was 13, and my dad's like, absolutely not. You're not going till you're 18. So I didn't go visit LA in any of those contacts until I was 19 years old. And I went out there, and I was like, I called him after 2 weeks. I said, Dad, if I stay here, I'm going to die, because I was just partying like crazy. And so I came home on a red eye, and he shared with me, he's like, that's the reason I didn't take the risk, because that world, and he told me some stories of people he met, and he's like, that world is not what you think. And this is 25 years ago, 26 years ago. So 28 years ago. And, it's only in the last like 5 to 7 years that we've had all these things come out about the sexualization of children and being taken advantage of, or even, Dad never wanted me to wrestle either. Right. Because of what he saw in wrestling. I remember I met Pat Patterson at the Hall of Fame, and Pat's talking to me, and, my dad and I had kind of like this language that, and I just heard, and I was like, and I just kind of quit talking. And then Dad's like, let me tell you about that dude. Right. And so he knew all that stuff. And as I got older, he told me why he didn't pursue Ivan Drago. Like, he wasn't going to leave that world. And that world in LA, as we've seen, it's rough. It's rough, right?
It is rough. 100%. Next question. Chris G from Parsippany, New Jersey. Travis, what was the greatest lesson your dad taught you inside or outside the ring? Love, Mr. Wonderful, number one. It's a good question.
So it's funny. There's a quote by this bishop in the 3rd century, and he said, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. And so my dad, I think the greatest lesson I ever learned from him was unconditional love.
Wow.
And you can say the words, you can even show up at the baseball games. I never doubted that my father loved me, ever, not a single time. And he always said, I love you. He was, and to this day, whether it be my children, my girlfriend, my friends, like I'm, I saw texting with a guy yesterday. I was like, hey man, I love you. And so he never said to me, Travis, you need to tell everybody that you love, I love you. But he lived it. He lived it. And I saw how he respected people. Like, he loved, dude, we'd be at like a fan thing, and he'd be signing autographs. And if you're on the outside watching this, I didn't know who was more excited, him or the fan, because he appreciated them so much. And I've had one person say my dad was mean, like, to him at asking for an autograph. And it might be true. Like, he wasn't perfect. So that doesn't, I'm not saying he was, but that is not 99% of the comments are, man, your dad was amazing. He was so down to earth. Right. And so, and I'll say this, this relationship I have with my mom that was volatile, unconditional love also includes forgiveness. Right. And so when my father passed, I can tell you, I did not want my mother like buried next to him. That's how angry I was. But I had a mentor, and, I confess to being a Christian, which means I have ideals and things I'm required to live up to, no matter how I feel. Right. And that moment, even though I was angry with her, I bought the tombstone with both their names. I bought the plot next to him because I loved my dad more than I disliked my mom. Right. Like, that transition happened. It just didn't happen until he passed, and my own mortality came into view. And so no question whatsoever, that was the greatest lesson that I ever learned from him. And he did say this one time. We were driving to the airport, and I was 16 or 17. And so, I spent more time in Atlanta Hartsfield than I think I did in school. But I drove him up there, and, he's driving, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and traffic is flowing. He stops, and there was a younger man and his dad. The dad hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. And he looked at me and said, "Never be embarrassed to love your father."
Wow. Okay, great.
So that carried over into everything, which also meant he loved the gym. Like what he did, he either loved it and he did it all the way, or he didn't like it and he didn't do it at all.
All right, next one here. Danny R. from West PA. He says, there was a great promo from the 80s with your dad at Spa, getting his nails, hair, and shoes shine. Did he do any of that in real life?
No. I mean, well, yes, he actually, what's funny is, like I was the only kid in high school that shaved the hair on his body, because to me that was normal, right? Like I'm like, when I found out people had hair all the time, I'm like, or I'd see him take their shirt off, I'm like, that's disgusting, right? Because my dad cared for his body in that way. So, I shaved my legs at an early age, and, but he took me to I was a kid, like 15 years old, and we went to the spa together, and yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I got a friend of mine, one of the guys that worked for me, we became friends. I think he was 19 and I was 24. And I took him to get his nails done. And about once a year, every few years, I'll get a message, "Dude, I've been going to get my nails done ever since the day you took me." Right. So what I would say is there were moments we would be in an element and something would happen that would get him charged up.
Mm-hmm.
And he would get, a little aggressive verbally, not belittling, not mean, but like kind of direct. And I didn't, my mom always said this. I never had anything to compare it to, but she always said, "Your father let you get away with everything." And so I could say things to him I don't think anybody else could say. But there were times where I'd look at him and go, "Yo, you're not Mr. Wonderful right now." And his perspective would like, "Oh yeah, like I need to chill out." But no, he was very kind and tenderhearted, and he was more introverted than you might think. So people approached him. He wasn't the guy that was going to go approach somebody, about something else. Like if you went over to talk to him and he liked your shirt, like he would ask about it. But it wouldn't be like he'd walk across the room and go, "Hey, man, I really like your shirt. Do you mind telling me where I got that from?" So, but no, he was not. He was a prima donna. Like this is true. Like he would take a shower every single night and fix his hair with hairspray before he went to bed, right? Like, and he would put cologne on, and I would be like, "Dad, you're getting in bed. What does it matter?" And he's like, "This is how I am. Like, period. There's like, I'm always going to be, so people are like, his hair was always in place." I'm like, even at bedtime, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. All right. Next one. Brett B. from Emerson, New Jersey says, at the end, Dad was suffering from dementia. Do you believe it was CTE from all the bumps that he took in the 80s, not protecting themselves?
So I don't know how you protect yourself in wrestling other than to not do those bumps. And so I know it was CTE,
okay,
because Chris Nowitzki,
Chris Nowitzki, yep, I know
he was connected to, and I was able to get in touch with Dr. Amalu. And Dr. Amalu, Will Smith played him in the movie Concussion. So his team came and did the autopsy of my dad.
Oh, wow.
And I got a phone call from the funeral because I donated his brain. And I got a phone call, and the guy said that he's like, "Hey, I want you to know the doctor's here." And he said his brain has shriveled up like a raisin. It had just shriveled up. And he said, it is likely that he did not know who he was for the last 20 years. And I thought that was extreme, and I didn't really believe it. But then later, I went through he was a doodler, right? So he had all these notepads everywhere. So I went through those things and I found a phone number that associated with me that was over 20 years old. And it had my name and it said son, and then it had a bunch of question marks. So there was all this evidence as I was sorting through it going, yeah, he didn't know what was going on at times. Now, it gradually got worse. And so that was something that would have been in his early 50s after he retired from WCW after his injury. And so that when I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, most of our conversations weren't a dialogue. It was a lot more of him asking me questions. And if I asked him anything, it was a very short answer. But I do believe it got worse and aggressively worse after he had stage 4 cancer and he went through radiation and chemo. And so that, like, he was functional up until that point, but after the cancer, man, it wrecked him. And he shriveled down. He went from 215, 220 down to 180 pounds. And so that certainly exacerbated the CTE. But there's no question. I mean, he played football from the time that he was able to put on, a jersey. And so those wrecks physically on your body, they wrestled 350 days a year for, 4 or 5 years, 6 years of his career, really probably closer to 10 years. And they say that, those bumps are the equivalent of a 35-mile-per-hour car crash. Like you going 35 and then hitting something and it stops, and up to 55. People like Hogan were actually really good about not doing those moves. And I think that played into their longevity. But the pile driver, just imagine jumping up and landing on your lower spine right now.
Yeah.
I'm 47 and my dad was doing that. I wouldn't be able to get up, right? Yeah. And that's not me holding anybody and leaping off the ground and take that impact, right? So dementia, so there's a lot that goes into where you go from Alzheimer's, dementia, and CTE. Really, those are classifications of the brain function. So his brain was suffering from CTE, which then caused dementia, right? Like it's kind of the other way around. But ultimately, that's the diagnosis.
Gotcha. David R. from Allentown, PA says, I saw your dad at a show in 2016. I asked him to sign a VHS that had him and Roddy Piper on it. Your dad took it and started to cry as Piper had died in 2015. Was Dad emotional?
100%. 100%. Good and bad, right? So he was, if he was angry, that emotion came out. But I can tell you, growing up, my father was not ashamed to cry. I saw him cry in church. When Rick Rude died, he cried. He called me and would cry. When my grandfather, his father-in-law, Ross Maxwell, when he died, I remember so Dad was pretty staunch at this time around his political views. And so it was George Bush versus Bill Clinton, and at 91, I think. And so my grandfather and him started to, and my grandfather, my dad thought of my grandmother, he thought of them as parents, and they had been in his life since he was 16. They went to every high school event, college event, so forth and so on. But they got into this argument at our house, and my grandfather was talking about why he was voting for Bill Clinton. And it got so heated that my mom's like, you need to go upstairs. And so I'm at the top of the stairs listening to this, and I can hear the chair shaking because Dad would get so emotional, right? So we're at the funeral. We walk up to my grandfather's casket, and he said, Travis, do you want to touch his hand? Do you want to kiss him? And I was like, no, I don't even want to look. And he kind of forced me. So the two of us are standing over this casket, just crying, just tears just streaming down. And so that conversation about Bill Clinton, I mean, like it did not end great, but my dad wasn't one to get like truly aggressive. Like he just kind of was like, Ross, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. And my dad was big and heavy. And so everything shook when he walked. It sounded like a herd of cattle was going through our house. He was just walking around upstairs. So my grandmother comes over and leans in and goes, Paul? He's like, yes, Wanda. She's like, he voted for Bush. And my dad goes, just this huge smile. He's like, God, he knew how to get me, right? So it was so much fun to push his buttons at times. I would mess with him. I remember one time I said something about, I was like, Dad, you've never thought about kissing a man? And he just went nuts, right? And he would egg me on. Like that was just kind of how we did. But he was emotional. Like he cried when my children were born. He was, but I'm not even kidding. I would be like 19, 20 years old and I would come over and I'm there with my girlfriend. He's like, come sit in my lap, right? Like he was extremely affectionate. There were times we'd have conversations and I would be appreciative and grateful. And he would just say, I'm so proud of you with tears in his eyes. So absolutely. Like, and the downside to it was he could be emotionally chaotic in back in the day in the wrestlers, it could be aggression, but he certainly, as he got older, got more and more tender and more and more emotional. And Roddy Piper, if I just said his name, there'd be a tear. He'd have to catch it. And to be honest with you, it's funny because there was like 2 decades where I didn't cry, but I was angry all the time. Right. Like, but now, like, I'll cry in front of anybody about anything. If it brings me to that place. And for me, that's empathy. And so I was telling my girlfriend the other day, like I started tearing up about something and I said, I didn't cry for 2 decades. She goes, I don't know how, because that's just who you are. Like you just get, she's like, it's always good. She's, I've never seen you lose your patience. You don't yell. She's like, but man, you love deep. And that's how my father was.
Wow. That's great. George S. from PA says, I was in Target yesterday and saw the Piper's Pit 3-pack with your dad. I was going to get it. Do you and your family get royalties from these figures today?
So yes, because otherwise they can't make them, right? Like there's many people are familiar with the Legends contract. And so what I would share is, because I saw one recently that somebody posted, Mark Miro had posted about like the return that you get from some of these things. And I share this just so people understand. Number one, I don't mean this in a bad way, but people ask me questions about this sometimes, and I'm like, that's none of your business. Like, this is a question I get. It's a general question, but people are like, how much money do you make off that? And I'm like, that is absolutely none of your business at all.
Correct.
Plus, I have an agreement. But when my father passed, I said, we started the social media and whatnot. And I said, I'm taking over. So I'm the executor of his estate. And I called WWE and I said, is he still under contract? And they were like, no. And I basically was told, like, and I think this stemmed from the lawsuit that was going on about CT that dad, and by the way, I never agreed with. Like, there's no way Vince or anybody else knew about CTE that early, right? Like, this is I said, Dad, I wouldn't do it. That's not to say it didn't happen later, but I don't think my dad would. And I don't think my dad would have. I said, you would have wrestled anyway. Like, people know it in football and they still play for a decade, right? So I called them and I was basically told they wanted nothing to do with my dad and not to expect anything going forward. And I was like, well, that's not why I'm doing the estate. So we really had nothing on the table. And I wasn't ready. I have a very, very high level of discernment when it comes to people. And honestly, wrestling promoters, toy makers, all of that, like that, my spirit just goes, I don't trust you. And it comes from Dad and all the promoters I saw, many of which like didn't pay my dad, which they regretted, and that was remedied. So that world kind of made me very standoffish, right? Like I just wasn't sure. So I said, well, he's not under contract. I'm going to do these social media pages. And Tyler Elnick, who's the producer, and he does a lot of the or all the research and post, and I do all the commentary and interactions, and I'll do an individual post too, but he really does the history of.
Okay.
But we started with nothing. Like there was nothing. And Pro Wrestling Tees allowed us to come up with a t-shirt line. So we started there. And then over time, as I healed and felt comfortable even taking that next step, and we grew our social media, we did get into some agreements with a couple of toy manufacturers, and we had a great run with Title Run Toys. They did a great job with that figure. And then, I really just kept moving forward, and Tyler would be like, man, do you think we'll ever get anything with WWE? And I was like, that's not why we're doing it. Our job is only to bless one person. Like, I want to bring joy to the world, because that's who, like, I want you to see how much I loved my dad, right? Yeah. Not I don't need proof or validation. It was because people are like, are you proud of your dad? He was a wrestler. I'm like, it's not because of the wrestling. It's because of it's because of Paul Orndorff, not Mr. Wonderful, right? That's cool, but it also came with a lot of negatives that I don't always share. Oh, and I can assure you, they tend to top the benefits, because people are like, you're wrestling royalty. And I'm like, I haven't seen a royalty check, right? So we built that. But then what would have been his 75th birthday, that morning I had written, from my heart, just how I felt about, celebrating his birthday. And so I'm sitting there in my computer, and at the time I was helping out this nonprofit, help people get into insurance and then into recovery. And I did it as a volunteer, as a servant. And I get a text message, and it's like, hey, Travis, are you available to talk later? This is I won't mention that. It was Ben from WWE. And I looked down at it, and I sent it to Tyler, because he always believed we were going to get back involved. I'm like, I don't think that way. Like, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do today. I'm in love with the process. Like, if that comes, it's a byproduct, but I can't control that. And so I texted to him, and I was like, dude, I think we're getting a call up to the majors. Like, but I had Googled his name. I'm like, this is a spam call, and all this stuff, right? And like, how did this dude even get my number? And so I look up the phone number and the area code. I'm like, oh no, this is in Connecticut. This might be legit. And so Ben called me later, and one of the coolest conversations I've ever had, talking about getting emotional. So he says, hey man, we've been watching what you're doing, and we love it, and we want to be a part of it. Wow. And so I am, I lose it. I'm crying. And Ben goes, there was just complete silence. Wow. And Ben's like, he thought he offended me. He thought I was upset. He's like, is this okay? Is it okay that I ask? And I go, Ben, I would have done it for free. And that was the truth, because I just wanted to honor my father. It was never and based on that conversation, and then ultimately signing with them to an agreement, it did limit my ability to do other things, right? That's part of the deal. But it opened up, and my dream was always to play him in a video game and do the pile driver. And then he hit WWE 2K25, and I'm like, I'm done. I have no other aspirations with this other, that was I have no other dream with this. Yep. And so, yes, there's things that you'll see within that, because there's toys, there's video, there's a breakdown, there's video game, there's trading cards. And so there might be something you get a very, very low percentage of it. And Mark Miro had made a post it was $39,000 of revenue, and he got $70. That's true. But some of that stuff doesn't have any profit, right? There's layers to it. And there's some things you do, and you're like, whoa, that went crazy. But the reality is, and I'm just being honest, if you look at the work we do every day over the last 5 years, it doesn't pay the bills. It pays the taxes. You know, like it allowed me to recoup some of the money I've invested personally, because we've never tried to, like, even though we advertise our t-shirts, we don't make anything on it. Like, when you really look down at it, $6, $8, $50, $28, that's not, like, look at the amount of energy we put into this.
Of course.
It honestly covers expenses.
Yep.
And they take care of us. It's not a bad deal, but it's like, I have an income. This is yet to, truthfully, I've yet to make $1, but that's because of what I invested and without ever expecting a return on that. And by the grace of God, you know, I've gotten to recoup some of that. So maybe in the future I'll make some money, but not yet.
All right. Hank D from Hackensack, New Jersey says, "Hey, Travis, your dad was the total package in wrestling. I can't picture him as anything else. If he wasn't a wrestler, I heard he would have been a cop. Any truth?"
So his father and my grandfather both served in the Korean War and had spent years in the military. And he was recruited by the Navy SEALs. And I think if my mom had not gotten pregnant with my brother, so I'm 47, my brother's 57. My brother's Paul Orndorff III. My dad is Paul Orndorff Jr. But she got pregnant in high school, like in her junior year. He finished high school. And I think if he had not had a child, he would have gone into the military. Now, at the time that he went into wrestling, he was working with my grandfather. My grandfather worked for MetLife Insurance, and he was failing miserably. So I think there would be a couple things. If you move forward 30 years and my dad is born in 1980, I think he would have been a UFC fighter instead of a wrestler.
Okay.
And him and I had those conversations. Like, I could have done that, right? And I'm like, I believe you, right? Like, he would have studied all of it and gone, like, it would have been something he would have been done very well. I can say I think a police officer, some type of industry like that, security, like 100%, I believe that would have been on the table. He went to college to be a PE teacher.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just so you know, I've never heard a story about his college days other than football. He never mentioned a professor or a class he went to. Like, I honestly, like, when he graduated from high school, you know, they went through the line and went back to their homeroom, and like the principal came down because they were tight, and he handed my dad's diploma to my mom and looks at her and says, "You earned this." You know, like, so it, you know, like, it was because it was assumed she did his homework, right? So, and he was extremely intelligent, but, you know, there was reading and some of that stuff was difficult for him.
Okay. Next one. Frank C from Alpine, New Jersey says, "Travis, your dad is considered one of the greatest wrestlers of the golden era. With your last name being Orndorff, do you always get asked if you're related to Mr. Wonderful?"
That's a two-part. Okay. So growing up, yes, 100%, because nobody knew another Orndorff.
No,
and you know, like, and I joke about this, but it's true. Like, I'm friends with several of the wrestlers' kids, like Lacey Traylor. Like, he didn't go by Ray Traylor, right? Like, he went by Big Boss. So and Georgia Smith, her last name's Smith, right? Yeah. Like, not. And she's amazing. She's done, if any, like, she was something when I started doing this, I went, she's doing a good job. Like, we want to do it our way and do it with our personality, but there was a lot there to emulate. She's done amazing. And her brother Harry is awesome. But unless people know who your dad is, you can escape in society, right? Anywhere I put my driver's license, a debit card, a credit card, like, it was always front and center. And what I would tell you is, because of kayfabe, like, it's real. Like, we had to kayfabe our lives in many ways. Like, so when I was younger and Orndorff was on my back, everybody knew which Orndorff it was. And that would have been, you know, 83 to 88, right? And it carried on too. But, you know, I lived in a small town. I went to school in a couple of different places, but ultimately I went to a very small school for my high school years. And everybody knew my dad personally. we went to church together, and he went to my baseball games. And so the initial part of it was very much exposure. And then it was like, oh yeah, his dad's Paul Orndorff, and nobody cared, right? Not as much. But it definitely was like everywhere I went, I got to the point where I would say my name and go, yes, he's my father, right? And if I got the look, all right, there's this look that I would get. Now, later in life, and I've learned this, that became my identity unintentionally, right? Like that I wasn't even Travis, I was Paul Orndorff's son. That's not anybody's fault. That's how I adapted to it. But later in life, I had a friend of mine be very honest with me one time. He's like, Trav, nobody cares anymore. And it wasn't because of like I was turning it into anything. It was that I brought it up. So I would go somewhere, and that look was not, is that Paul? Are you Paul Orndorff or related to Paul Orndorff? It was, how do I spell that? So there was this transition where I had been doing this for so long, and at this point, nobody cared, and I had to undo that. So now I'll go places, and it's very age specific. I'm thinking of, I remember I got to work one day, and the guy had made my card because I had to go in through security and card to get in. I worked in finance, and the guy finally goes, hey, and I knew it as soon as he said that. Is your dad Paul? I'm like, yeah. So it still happens, but it's people that are 45 and older, right? But I would say now nobody cares.
Okay. All right. Bobby T from Hillsdale, New Jersey. And he says, Travis, is it tough when fans ask you about your famous dad? I know wrestling fans can be a little aggressive. We don't mean to be. We are just passionate about wrestling and your dad.
Passionate is not the right word, Bobby. And I'll say it this way. I went to this independent wrestling show, and I'm standing over in the corner talking to Diamond Dallas Page's wife, Paige.
Okay.
And I had the spinal fusion that year. We're talking about yoga, right?
Okay.
And this line to get DDP's autograph is like out the door. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that dude has not wrestled in 2 decades. Like, so to me, I'm like, I'm trying to figure that out. Anyway, this line's moving, and I keep noticing this, and man, I saw this girl. I mean, she was squirming. She was so happy. And I looked at Paige, and this is like so I did not get on social media for decades. Like I only got on it after my dad died, really. Okay. And started interacting with people because I did feel overwhelmed. And it wasn't anybody else. It was that need for privacy because of kayfabe, and my life was rough. I didn't want anybody to know that I was struggling. I mean, I talked to you about all the surgeries I had. Yeah, I don't want that public, especially because I was struggling with mental health as well because of that. And so I stayed away from it and was very private. And I would go into it, and then I'd feel overwhelmed, and I'd quit like a week later, But I remember sitting with Paige, and I looked at her, and I said, do you see that young lady? And she said, yeah. I said, I've never been that happy about anything in my entire life. And there was this transition that when I was growing up, I hated fans because anytime I had my dad, it turned into a tour, right? Like, we're there for 45 minutes afterwards. People were coming up and asking autographs during dinner. And like, I just want my time with my dad. We would go to, he'd come to my baseball game, and he would be in his chair without his shirt on in the back of a truck and sitting in a lawn chair, and he's tanning. There's a line of people. And I would go up to bat, and I would look out, and I'm like, he would tell him to stop, right? So he could watch me. But it was like, I didn't feel like he got that opportunity. But later on, I've said this, there is nobody more passionate in this life about anything as what I've seen wrestling fans do, right? So it was overwhelming for years. And it was there. I can tell you this, there were times that the first year or two was I was struggling with his passing. I was grieving. I would message Tyler and go, hey man, I need a break. And I would not go on our social media pages or comment for like a month because I needed to just recoup because it was a lot of at the beginning, like I was crying, like all these stories I wanted to share because I wanted you to know who he was to me.
Yeah.
But I'm also reading this stuff and it's encouraging me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is there are times people go a little too far,
Mm-hmm.
and I've learned how to deal with it.
Okay.
And so I'll give a small example. I got a text message one time from somebody I gave my phone number to who knew I was in finance and they were going through something big and they were like, hey, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, let's talk. So we talked for several weeks, like this went on, and I helped him. I mean, he saved a lot of money and was able to build a house. It was a very complex situation.
Okay.
And I said to him, hey man, I got one rule. And that rule is do not ask me about wrestling. That's not why I'm here. Like, that's not okay. And he sent me several weeks later, he sent me a question. And I went, hey man, I made that very clear. That this is not your access to me to ask your fan questions, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you want Travis, that's cool. If you want Paul Orndorff's son, that's online, right? So I do have boundaries, and I have expectations, and I'm very, very easy to get along with, right? Like I'm pretty, I like if I make a mistake, I'll own it. Every once in a while, like I had something recently where somebody used some images of me, and it was not done, and nor did they ask me, and it was something I was going to be involved with, and it was like snapshots of videos on my personal page. And what, like Joe, when you did our advertisement for these things, you would say, hey, Trav, is this a good image, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm used to, just professionalism. Well, the ones that were used, I'm like, first of all, I didn't know you were going to do that. Like, I'm okay with it. But like, hey, this is my image. Like, if you're going to share that and you want me to share it, here's what I'd like. And at that point, you'll find that some people just don't want to own it. They almost get offended, right? And I'm like, I'm doing this because I love my father and I love the fans, but there's a line where I go, no, I like, hey man, like I'm doing this for you because I care about you as a person. But if you can't respect my wishes, then I'm going to step away. Now, I will also say Facebook is the only, every once in a while on Instagram or Twitter, somebody says is what I would consider just kind of too far. You've crossed the line. And I can tell most of the time it is actually bots. But I don't allow that negativity. And what I said on Facebook was, if you interact with this page and you are respectful, I'll be a babyface. But if you are not, I will be a heel. And don't forget who raised me, because I've been cutting promos since I was a kid. And so, not everybody sees that post, but a lot of people do. And then, some of them like, oh, you need to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so my block game, like Dikembe Mutombo, was not as solid of a block as I am. And it got to be almost a hobby where I was blocking, I kid you not, 20, 30 people a day.
Wow.
Because they would go too far. And so what I'll tell you is, I think I'm being playful, but I forget how sensitive people are. And I'm not sensitive. Like it really takes, like, I've been ribbed my entire life. So, and I'm telling you up front, I shouldn't have done this. Jesus got mad at me when I did this because I knew better and I still did it. But every once in a while, somebody says something, I usually just delete it if I kind of know who you are, or, because I look at these comments, every single one I try to interact with. On all of our pages, I try to interact and answer questions. And I try to be very available, right? Because I know it means something. Like, this is just, it's who I am, right? So this guy posted, he said, why did you post this stupid video? And again, I'm so sorry I did this. I responded back, do not concern yourself with such matters. Go back to the basement and tell your mom I said hi. And he lost it. And I took a screenshot and like send it to Tyler. And so I will do that with other people. Like there's one of my buddies, he's a referee, but he's also buddies Mark Charles. And so he will be like, he'll say stuff, and I come right back at him. And like we're playing, like we have that relationship. Like he'll be like, it was like the thing with Danny Davis, and I was like, all you referees are paid off, and like we just having fun with it. But I'm constantly attacking him about his character and integrity, and like he'll promote. We're having fun, right?
Yep.
So this guy lost it, bro. Like, and when I mean lost it, like he edited. So I took a screenshot because I always know people will do stuff. He edited his post to say, "Why did you post that video?" So you remove the word "stupid," and then he goes off. And I was like, I was going to apologize because I realized it touched the nerve. And it got so bad. I'm like, I sent him kind of a nice message and saw that he saw it, responded, and I blocked him because he wasn't stopping.
Oh, wow.
Within 5 minutes, he follows me from another Facebook page he has.
Oh my God.
And he goes again. And I'm like, oh, I'm out. Blocked him. He comes at me with a government Facebook page and follows me that way and starts saying he's going to expose me. I mean, he lost it. So when I tell you they're passionate, they are also sensitive because they will say some of the rudest comments. And if you come back at them, they will literally break down in front of you. So yes, it happens. A little aggressive is a very, very nice way to say it. 99% of the fans are amazing.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely amazing.
Okay. Jeff P. from New York says, Mr. Wonderful was a legit badass. Did Big Van Vader apologize after your dad beat his ass?
Well, what I would say is, and this might surprise people, Dad would react in that moment and have that, he got the fight, but it was not something he was proud of after the fact. And now, did his ego play into that? And did he cut promos about it? Absolutely. They all did. I've been with my dad when he cut a promo and I look at him and I'm like, you don't feel that way about that person. He's like, no, I don't. I love him. And I'm like, that's not what you just said. I had to learn myself. Like when the camera was on, it was a different version. What I will tell you is the two of them, I think it was 2016, there was a convention. Might have been 17. And we've posted it. The two of them made peace together. Like, and actually went out on stage together, hugged it out. Big Van Vader had given me a puppy because he,
did he? Wow.
Yeah, Leon had breeded these boxers, and I was like, Dad, do I have to give the dog back? Like it all, like this is so. What I would tell you is, Dad and Vader were not enemies until that day, and then they tried to make amends before, and neither of them would do it. But then they got a little bit older, and I remember. Dad was way more proud of that moment than he ever was the fight.
Gotcha. All right. Dennis K from West PA says, did you go to the Hall of Fame induction with your dad? How did he feel about it? And how was he treated by the WWE?
So I did go, and I am sitting right behind Hogan's daughters, or Hogan's daughter and wife, and wearing a pink shirt. I look really good, of course. And so yes, my mom was not the one that traveled with my father. I was. So I was there at the induction. I actually got the opportunity to present him with the Iron Mike Ward at Magursky, I think is his last name, at the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2016. So I was always at those things. That was when he could bring somebody, it was always me. I was the only one that ever went. My mom never went. I was sitting there and Dad was good. He actually was glad. And then he went up and he did his speech. And funny story, I looked at Dad and like I do motivational speaking and share. And I'm all, as you can tell, I'm a talker. And I'm a verbal processor. So when he went up to give his speech, I'm like, Dad, do you want any, like, here's some note cards you want? He's like, no, I got it. He went up there blind and did that Hall of Fame speech. That was 100% off the top of his head in the moment. So when he went and sat down, he realized, and he was not happy about it, that they didn't televise all the guys doing their speeches. They really only televised Hogan. And they did Roddy too, but they cut that short. And that pissed him off. Like something severe, because he thought it was disrespectful to all the guys and himself. And so he was irritated, which is where that story comes from. He threw his WWE plaque in the trash, right? Oh yeah, he was hot. And so the rumor was he would tell people that. Well, he didn't know I put it in my bag.
Okay.
Because I know my dad well enough. He's irritated in the moment. He's reacting, but I gave it to him years later, and he's like, "I'm so glad you did that," because he regretted it, right? So I know my father well enough. But the WWE, what I would say is, because I got to be around them and Vince, they were respectful, but it's a business. Like dad, they had dad help out another wrestler at one time, and he was what's his name, Chris Masters. So we went to a show after the WWE event. He gave him some tips, and dad did some things, some spots there, like helping other guys out, because he was a great trainer. He was really, really good at that. But what I would say is they treat you like you used to work here. Right? Like it's not, they don't have that admiration and appreciation. I think they do more now. I know that not everybody agrees with the way wrestling has evolved. And what I would tell you is the wrestling that you see and what you saw and felt at 8 years old, kids today feel the same way you did, no matter if it is different, right? Like they don't know any better. So it does, so respect the fact that the new product makes just as many people happy as it used to. But yeah, it was like they're former employees, period. At the end of the day, they're former employees. There's no extra benefits just because.
That's a good point. All right, here we go. Brett R., Jacksonville, Florida. Hi, Travis. Quick story about your dad. It was April 92. My mother passed away, and I was taking a trip to Tennessee for the funeral. Your dad happened to be on the flight as he was wrestling for Smoky Mountain. Okay, and this is the next one. He was wrestling for Smoky Mountain at the time. I went up to him. I was a big fan. He was super nice and bought me coffee. When he found out I was traveling because my mother passed, he stayed with me the entire time and told me how much my mom missed me. I had just had a boy, and he showed me a picture, I believe was you, in a wallet, a little boy, and he said, "This is the love of my life." Your dad, next one says, your dad that day became not only my favorite wrestler, but my favorite human being with a heart of gold. Mr. Wonderful, number one.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that, because I'm trying not to get emotional. But yeah, that was my dad. There's stories. Thank you, Brett. Sincerely. Like, to be honest with you, those are the things that I read after he passed, that like there was this bitterness I didn't know I was carrying until he passed towards wrestling, because he was always gone. There's a lot of turmoil. My life doesn't look like what you think. And there was a hint of bitterness and jealousy. And so I didn't like wrestling fans at all. And then when I started to hear stories like this, and there's hundreds of them, and people are so genuine and caring that they share those things with me. And it may sound odd, but it gave my life purpose. Like all those things that I was bitter about, my dad was out changing the world. Like he was encouraging people through his work, his ethics, his body, and then situational like this, where Brett saw this tender side of my father. And this is actually the norm. Like this is what I usually hear. Different versions of it, right? And so thank you. And what I would say is there's stories like where somebody was in a wheelchair, and there was a young man who clearly dealing with learning disabilities and physical disability. I believe in this one situation, the kid was autistic, and Dad went over, like, we'd have the gates, and people would be standing over here, and of course they're all passionate and screaming names, and you just kind of get used to it. And my dad cut through that gate and went over and sat with that young man, signed autographs for him, and then got him front row seats for the show that night.
Wow.
And then he had him come back, and he had all the wrestlers go up to him as well that were there. Wow. And that's my dad. That, like, truthfully, like that's how. And what I'll say is, I don't know my dad before he became a Christian, really. So he became a Christian in 1985, And I remember him giving his testimony, and he pointed up to heaven and he said, he's the real Mr. Wonderful. And I never forgot that. Now, I didn't come to believe until I was 18. But what I would tell you is he was in his Bible more than you think. Like, so I've heard stories of who he was when he was 18 to 25. I don't know those stories. I never experienced that, but I know it happened. You just read from Brett what I go back to was, what's the greatest lesson that your father ever taught you? That you just read it. That's the greatest lesson. And he didn't tell me about this stuff. He didn't do it for attention. He's never talked about it on TV. Look, all the way I treat. He just does it because that's who he was.
Wow, that's amazing. Totally amazing. Billy H from Bloomsburg, PA. He says, "Hi, Travis. Did your dad dislike Mr. T in real life?"
Not at all. Not at all. And it's funny. Perspective. Listen, the boys and the guys back in the day, like the road they had to travel to get to WrestleMania, like the nights, the weekends, the devotion to their craft, learning to work a crowd, getting built up in territories, going to new territory. Like their life in many ways was a living hell. It was rough. So for Mr. T to come in and be a main event wrestler with no background of wrestling, that broke the cardinal rule. But Dad later was like, Vince understood what he was doing, because there was Muhammad Ali. Like, it's funny, the people they don't mention during WrestleMania, Muhammad Ali, Liberace came out, Cyndi Lauper, there were other people ringside. But no, he did not dislike Mr. T. He disliked anybody that didn't have the history in the business, because he didn't know how to wrestle. Like, and you can see it. Like, and so like that was them protecting, the kayfabe because you brought in an actor, right? Like, it wasn't sports entertainment yet.
No,
Vince 100%. Created that, and WrestleMania was the first evolution.
Yep, 100%. Here's the next one. Linda T from New York says, "Travis, I know what you went through. People don't realize how hard it is to get someone out of the hospital when you don't have legal custody. Did you file an emergency legal guardianship?"
So no, I didn't have to because. So one, I had called Adult Protection Services for years. Like I DFACS, Department of Family and Children Services, and filed complaints.
Okay.
And there's a wrestler that I believe also called in 2019 when this is, and I was going through my own stuff. I had been paralyzed in my right arm. I'm like, I'm in, my life is falling apart. I got divorced. Like, there was a lot going on all at the same time where I wasn't the man I needed to be available to honestly deal with these in a better way. I didn't know how to. There's no book to read to tell you as things are dissolving. And I never thought it would get this bad. So because I wasn't labeled or named on the next of kin worksheet, they wouldn't share any diagnosis. They don't share any information with you. I got my mom to agree to send him to this facility. I had already talked to the woman, and and she's like, "Listen, here's what we do. I've got a friend that's a social worker at this hospital. We'll bring him here. I'll see what's going on. And if he's able to come home, you come pick him up. You take him to the hospital. You fill out the paperwork." And so the paperwork that was signed at that facility, my mom gave a verbal agreement, but she did not fill out the paperwork with me as next of kin. Otherwise, we would have been much easier. I would have just taken him home the next day. But because that wasn't done, she pulled me aside. She goes, "Hey, your mom didn't put you again." I said, "You were in the room when I said for her to make me first, right?" And she's like, "Yes." She's like, "I got a plan." So she kept him. She actually took him to the hospital on a Sunday, and I was going to go pick him up. And the social worker said, no, he's got to bring him. And my mom had verbally agreed. So I went back that Monday morning and picked him up at 9 a.m., took him to the hospital. The doctor came in and gave me the news. His throat wasn't opening when he was drinking and eating. His brain had stopped telling it. So he looked at me. He's like, "Your dad's going to die a horrible death if you continue to feed him, because food's going to go down into his lungs. Ooh. And he's going to choke to death. He's going to asphyxiate. And, you know, and by the way, I'm telling you all this from memory. I didn't take notes that day, but this is what I remember. So I hope the medical things I'm sharing with you, because I brought him, filled out the paperwork, the social worker released him to me. And then all that paperwork got sent to hospice. And so hospice came out that next day, but he went home with me, and they were like, hey, we can bring him to our facility. And I was like, absolutely not. He's not leaving. I left. I was in finance, so I took a leave of absence, and I said, I'm not leaving his side. And so he was with me for 3 days, 4 days. And then, so hospice had a bed, and I was there by his bed the entire time. Like literally, I slept on the couch, or, you know, like I was within 30 feet the whole time. And, you know, I'd be up all night, all that stuff. And so at about day 3 or 4, the lady came over to give him a shower. And I was like, I got to go take a nap. So I go lay down, and they go, hey, your dad's refusing to take a shower. And this is the first time he had refused anything. Now, he's not verbally saying it, but he just, so I go in there in my underwear, right? Because I'm completely comfortable being naked in front of people. Like that's how I was raised. I got in the shower. And so I'm bringing him in, and he looks at me, and I said, Dad, do you want to go lay down? And he shook his head, yes. I said, do you want to take a shower? And he shook his head, no, because he was nonverbal at that point. And so I took him downstairs. I laid him down the bed, and he never got out of it. That was the last time. And so after that point, you know, I'll be honest with you, like he was in a lot of pain. I delivered every single morphine dose every 4 hours. I remember the nurse came in and said, you know, if he doesn't eat or drink, you know, he's going to pass away in 3 days. And I was, you know, in tears. I looked at the lady. And I said, I wish you wouldn't have said that in front of him, because I don't want him to stay in pain. But now he's going to live for 2 weeks. And she just kind of shook her head, and no, that's not how it works. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'd have to go back, he lived like 12 or 13 days long, not 3 days. And I blame it on her.
Wow. As we begin to wrap up, because I know with, you know, your time and everything, I'll be respectful. And I know I got a lot of questions, but guys, I got to wrap it up here soon.
We can do another one.
We can do part 2. That's great. Cause you know, Travis, I love having you on. You're the best, bro.
I know. I look in the mirror every morning. I don't need you to validate it. I'm just kidding.
Victor V from Austin, New York says, hi, Travis. Mr. Wonderful will live on forever. He's part of 80s culture. You probably will never know how much your dad means to many of us crazy wrestling fans.
What I'll say is I have an understanding of that. I because of this journey in the social media, I actually do. I do. I do. And in all honesty, I believe that is why I was able to grieve. Like grieve is an expression of the depths of your love for something, and it's there, and it's gone, and there's nothing you can do about it, but deal with that love. It's love. Grief is an expression of love. But when you know I always tell people that if people want to paint over some of these pictures of my dad when he's in bad shape, oh, we shouldn't show that one. And I'm like, you need to see that so that you understand what he paid to get there. I want you to know the price. Like, it makes you uncomfortable. I'm his son, right? But this is real. This is the price you pay for the lifestyle of wrestling and what he went through. You know, like, it's not to embarrass him. It's an opportunity for you to face your own mortality. Because when you leave this earth, because you're eventually going to break down as well, what I realized in that moment with my dad was, one, the promise I made him that people wouldn't forget him, and I would do social media, which I had no clue how I was going to do, but I made that promise. And the second one was I would become the man that he wanted me to be. Not for him, for me. And you know, like, there he was so proud of me, and I've heard this from wrestlers. You know, somebody mentioned that was a picture of me, by the way, because he he kept it with me, or he kept the picture with me of like my senior year picture or something.
Yep.
But it was like my school pictures. He would keep one. And so like when you see those pictures of Bobby at the end and he's got the cancer, and people are like, you're disrespecting the family. And I'm like, I know what you're thinking because that's uncomfortable. But do you see the result of your life? That is what happens. And if you don't want that to happen, if you don't want to break down, you have the opportunity to make choices either by how you want to be remembered or how you want to go.
Yeah.
So sleep, diet, gym, all those things. Like my dad survived stage 4 cancer because he had enough muscle mass that the cancer ate the muscle mass instead of his organs. We jokingly said steroids save your life. Like that doctor joked. It was like that kind. So I get where people feel it's difficult to see some of those things.
Yeah, of course.
But that video of him in the hospital is how I got everything done. And then I took it down. Now other people took it, and we've asked them to remove it, and some people will, some people won't. But don't ever doubt that I have an understanding of how you feel about him. Because if I didn't know, I wouldn't keep doing it. I would have, like, he got the video game. I was like, I've done everything I wanted. We've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish and more, right? But the reason we continue to do it, and the reason Joe, I've told you, it's so weird when people send me a message, right?
Yeah.
And they're treating me like I'm somebody, right? Like, and I'm just this kid, right? And so, but I don't do it because it makes me feel good. I do it because I know it means something. I think to myself, I have no idea why my words carry meaning, right? But I've experienced that when I do these videos, and it becomes an encouragement to other people and appreciation. Our goal with the social media, and you can ask anybody that's been involved, bless one person per day. And there's these moments where somebody shares that story, and I'm the one who's blessed, right? Like I never thought when I went out to do this, I would receive anything in return. Right. And so those stories, things like this, like, yes, you're all nuts, just so you know, but so am I. Right. So we did a post recently. It got like 3 million views. We don't get paid on that. Like, that's the illusion. Oh, you're famous and you have a bunch of people that you don't get paid on it. Like, none of his social media sites, I think we made $4 last year. Like, that's how little we made, right? But people are like, you have so many 100,000 followers. We passed 100 million views, Joe, across our social media. Yeah, nothing. $4. Like, I don't do this because I make a living off of it. I do it because I believe God gave me the opportunity and a platform. And this platform allows me to bring to you these life experiences, including the hard part of my dad passing. Because that I learned how to do. I learned how to agree through that. And in fact, I had a conversation. I'll end with this just because I know I went long. There was a moment recently where I was telling stories, and the person that was interviewing me goes, "Man, that's a lot of trauma. I'll move on." And I said, "Oh, I'm fine." And he goes, "I'm not. I can't. Wow. This is too heavy for me." And I went, well, that never crossed my mind, right? But I know there's times I tell stories that I think are funny, and I see people's face, and I'm like, oh, that's traumatic. I forgot. Like, like there's a level of that. But when you have the opportunity to share this truth, after my dad passed, my anger was so bad that I couldn't sleep. And my mentor, Hugh Kirby, called me and said, "Hey, I want you to go." It was this class at church called Forgiving Forward. And I went into this class, and, in my mind, I was like, yeah, I've forgiven everybody, blah, 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 blah. And I hadn't. Like, not really. Because I physically still got ill every time I ran into Fayette County because I was still angry. But the guy looked at me. There was a video. So he wasn't really looking at me, but I made eye contact. And it was a simple thing. And I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you what works for me. I'm not telling you what to change their faith or, I did my work. You do yours. And if you got any questions, feel free to call me, right? But the guy looked at me and said, so you want Jesus to forgive you for all of your stuff, but you won't forgive them. And that hit me so hard because I'm like, I can't be. Now, I didn't know what would come of it. There was no promise of like peace and tranquility all the time, right?
Mhm.
But it was a reality that I had to do that because it was the right thing to do, no matter how I felt.
Yeah.
And I invited my mom to church for the first time. And like that had been probably a year and a half. I didn't even speak to her. And we went and I sat about 6 feet away from her because, and I remember somebody saying, when you can be with them and your body is whole and you've truly forgiven them, you won't react and you can be around them. And so every week I would go and pick her up and take her to church. And eventually I was sitting next to her. We were singing some hymns and I held her hand and we got done and we had a conversation. I said, Mom, if there's one thing I've learned in the last year of therapy and this and everything else, it's never too late. And I think because of all of the things she went through and, relationships that were not restored, she looked at me and said, it's too late for me. And it broke my heart, but I forgave her. I truly did. I did the work. Right. And so when the guy asked me, he said, we were talking and stuff and I was telling him a story and he goes, wait a second, you forgave her? And I said, absolutely I did. Because everything my father ever did and betrayed and all the stuff that goes with that, I've done those things. And the way my mom treated my dad, I'm doing it to my mom. So I'm guilty of everything they've ever done. How can I be mad at somebody for doing what I've done?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And he's like, wait a second. So she's buried next to him? I said, absolutely. Because that's what my father wanted. Yeah. I didn't want it at the time, but my love for my father was more important than my hatred, right? And so the guy sat with me and he looked at me and he goes, how did you get here so fast that all those things, like you were able to deal with it? And I said, I got honest with myself about who I am and how I want to be remembered. And I was not proud of what would be said. And there's people that if they remember me or knew me, I'm a tornado. And there's people that know me now that I'm a cool breeze. So I'm many things to many people. Some people are like, I can't imagine you getting upset. People honking me in traffic, going crazy. I don't even get fazed. And my girlfriend, one time, she's like, you are so calm. Like she said to me the other day, she said, one of the things you bring to our relationship that I didn't know I needed is calmness. I have been told my entire life I make coffee jittery, right? So that was against everything I've ever been, right? But that's what the work has done since his passing, because of fans that told me all these things that I needed to know about him and about me, right? Wow. So there's a journey here. And the thing I would share is I don't know where you're at or what you're going through. I can't tell you I understand it, even if it's very similar to my experiences. You have your own. So I have a level of empathy, but I may not fully understand. I will tell you, no matter what you believe in this moment, you have a choice. It's not too late.
100%. That's great, Travis. I could talk to you forever, man. Part 2, please. Let's do a part 2, man.
Deal.
Let's do it, man.
You know better. I talk too much. This is not something I hide at all. Like in fact, one time I was getting interviewed, and the guy's like, they stopped this interview, and the guy goes, "Are you a philosopher or something? Like, what do you do?" I was like, "Man, I'm in finance." And the other guy's like, "Man, I thought he was a pastor." Like, and the other guy was like, I thought he was a psychologist." And so like we get done. The guy's like, "Man, you're a great storyteller." I was like, "So you are." I said, "Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just being me, right?" And I get to be all of me, all my crazy, and I am. And anyway, we go to sit down, and we're about to go through like kind of a very quick questions. He's like, "Do not give me the philosophical answer for these questions." And I'm like, "That's all I need to hear, right? Like, I can do yes, no, but and it's bad and good. Like, I have taken the time to try to understand. And the term that I prefer is metacognition. That when I react in the moment, it's like I'm watching myself react so that I don't react.
Gotcha.
It's all your fault.
We're going to do a part 2. We got a lot more questions. We got about 40 more questions to answer to. We're going to get to them again for part 2. Travis,
I'll prepare myself mentally for shutting up.
Travis, I love you, brother. You know, stay healthy. I will talk to you in a little while. I got to run out, but thank you. Next week.
God bless. Love you.
You got it, brother. God bless.
Started from nothing. Jersey streets, we owned it. Jay-Z pumping iron.